So I'm going to go over all the different tools that you can use to make a solution. So there are two different situations that I'll be in when I need to make a solution. The first one that I'm going to go over is making a solution from a solid. So when you're making a solution from a solid, what you need to do is you're first going to figure out the mass of the solid you need. And once you determine the mass of the solid you need, then you need to use an electric scale in order to measure the mass of that compound. Okay? Once you've measured the mass, and make sure that you're using a weigh boat. Okay? Once you find the mass of the solid, then you can take it and then you're going to put it into whatever container you need to put it into. So for example, if I want a final volume of, let's say for example, 25 milliliters, I would use a 25 milliliter volumetric flask. So I would carefully pour the solid in here, then I would add enough water to get to this final volume, this line right here, okay? And the reason why I'm choosing a volumetric flask is because that is the most accurate way of measuring volume that we have, larger volumes, okay? So that's 25 mils. Or if you want to find a volume of 50, you can use a 50 mil volumetric flask. Or if you want 100 mils, you have a 100 mil volumetric flask. If you want 250 mils, 250 mil volumetric flask. If you want 500 mils, you're going to use a 500 mil volumetric flask. Or if you want 1,000 mils, we've got this big 1,000 milliliter volumetric flask. So you'll take the solid, you'll add it to whichever volumetric flask you need, then you'll add enough water so that it reaches the line, wherever the line is, and that will give you a total solution volume of whatever this tool is. Now the issue arises when you do not have a volumetric flask that is the size of the final volume solution that you want. So let's say, for example, I want 200 mils of my final solution. Well, I've got a 250 mil volumetric flask, and I've got a 100 mil volumetric flask. If I don't have a 200 mil volumetric flask, which I don't, then I would have to use a graduated cylinder. Okay, and so graduated cylinders, I've got 4 different sizes here. I've got 500 mils here, 100, 50, and then 10. So if I want a final volume of 200 mils, I would have to use this 500 mil graduated cylinder, okay? Because I'm not going to measure the volume of water twice, okay? So if I want 200 mils of my solution, I'd take my solid, I'd add it to the graduated cylinder, then I'd add enough water to get 200 mils, and then I would invert it in order to mix it, and you're going to do that with all of these. Invert it in order to mix your solution. Now that's not ideal because this has a really big top, and it's also not as accurate as one of these guys. So if you have the option of creating a solution with a volume of either 25, 50, 100, 250, 500, or 1,000, that's what we're going to do because we want to use a volumetric flask. All right, but if you don't have that option, that's fine. Let's say, for example, I want a 30 mil solution. For some reason, I don't want 25. I can't use one of these because they don't have that volume. So I'm going to look at these. Well, this is 10 mils, this is 50, and this is 100. Now, I have a lot of students who will use an 100 mil graduated cylinder in order to find the volume of 30 milliliters. Well, you want to use the graduated cylinder that has the final volume that is closest to what you want. So if I want 30 milliliters, I would use a 50 mil graduated cylinder because it's going to be more accurate. So I would put the solid in there and then add it until I got a final volume of 30 milliliters. Don't add water 3 times here or use a ridiculously large graduated cylinder when you have a graduated cylinder that has a final volume that is closer to what volume you want. So that's the first type of creating a solution, taking a solid, making a solution from it. The other situation is if you have a concentrated solution and you're wanting to dilute it. So in that case, what you'll do, because your solution, your concentrated solution, is already aqueous, it's in the liquid form, I'm going to have to first measure the volume that I need using a graduated cylinder. So let's say, for example, I need to measure out 15 milliliters of my concentrated solution, and then I'm going to add enough water to get a final volume of 500 mils. Okay? So if I'm wanting to measure 15 mils of my concentrated solution, I would use this 50 mil graduated cylinder, right? Because this 10 mil graduated cylinder is too small. So I would measure carefully my concentrated solution in this graduated cylinder, okay? Then you would pour it into your 500 ml volumetric flask because you have a flask with the final volume that you want, and then you'd add enough water in order to reach the final volume. Now, what a lot of people will do is they'll add a little bit of water first, then pour their concentrated solution in, and then add enough water to get that final volume. That's totally fine. But all that I'm going to ask you guys to note is using the graduated cylinder first and then adding enough water to get the final volume that you're looking for. All right, so there are a couple of different techniques that if you were actually to create a solution we would talk about, but all I want to know is that you understand that you need to use a graduated cylinder to find the volume of your concentrated solution. Then you're going to pour that in here, and then you'll add enough water to get the final volume that you need. Okay, so one more time to review. If you're creating a solution from a solid, you'll take the solid, measure it using the scale, then you'll add it to hopefully one of these volumetric flasks because they're more accurate. Otherwise, if you don't have the correct volume, then you'll have to use a graduated cylinder. If you are diluting a solution, you'll measure the volume of the concentrated solution first using a graduated cylinder, add it to your volumetric flask, hopefully if you have the volumetric flask that you need. Otherwise, what you'll have to do is add that concentrated solution into another graduated cylinder, and then you can add enough water to get your final volume. All of these tools will be out for you at a lab bench for a test. Okay, so you're not going to have to memorize which volumetric flasks I have. They'll be out, but you need to be able to recognize which ones you need to use.